Welcome, 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 everyone. My name is DeJuan Claiborne, and I have the opportunity to serve as your president and CEO of your League City Regional Chamber of Commerce. And just like businesses from all over the world, we pivoted to a virtual online platform to bring you real time, relevant information that you can apply today in your personal and professional life. And I am excited. This is the fifth and final session for 2020 with LaShasta Bell. She is one of our mental health experts. She's done a terrific job on the last four sessions. So she's going to wrap it all in and put a business spin to this one and discuss how mental health in the workplace can improve your bottom line. So with that being said, please help me welcome Miss LaShasta Bell.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the intro, Dewan, and thank you for allowing me to plug in this last segment on mental health and talking about increasing productivity and that bottom line in business and in life. So the what we're going to talk about today absolutely will be geared more toward business, but I want everyone to understand that we're one being. And so we have to start with the individual always. We have to start with number one, numero uno. It does not work if we try to go macro without going micro first. So even though we're talking more global and macro today, understand that what we talk about will be applicable on the individual level. It must be applied at the base first for it to have its full impact. So as always, I am going to start with definitions because I 110% believe that if we are going to be in communication today and we're going to have a conversation, it's ideal that we're operating from a similar place as we're defining the verbiage that's being used today. So the first thing I want to ask, and some of you have been on with me before, is mental health. How do you define mental health? What is your definition of mental health? Anyone want to share their definition of mental health? How do you define it?
Mental stability.
Mental stability. Okay. Anyone else? Mental health.
Being in the right headspace.
Being in the right headspace. Was that Hannah?
Candace.
Candace. Okay. It's showing you muted. That's so strange. But I hear you.
She's
Okay.
quick. She's quick with it. She unmutes to talk and then mutes right back.
Oh, I need you to teach me that skill, Candace, offline, because that's a quick and good to have in a Zoom meeting. So yes, being in the right headspace. Anyone else? David, you look like you're thinking about it. Are you thinking about an answer over there?
Mental health is overall condition of well-being within the head, like I think is being said, has the capability of taking and receiving different inputs and coming back to a common plane.
Yes, absolutely. All of the answers are correct. Mental health is everything. It's the way we interact with others. It's the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about the life that we live, the world that we live in. That is mental health. So let's understand, we're not talking mental health illness or mental health disorders. We're simply talking mental health. Mental health is goes hand in hand with physical health. So when you think about physical health, we clearly know that, hey, that's what happens in our body, that how we feel in our body, how our body works for us. Mental health, same thing. It's how our mind works for us, how we feel mentally, emotionally, psychologically. That is mental health. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page with this, because when we start talking about workplace and mental health, some people start to cringe up and go like, I don't know. I've talked recently with some business owners and managers and supervisors, and I'm just like, hey, when we're talking mental health in the workplace, what comes up for you? And one of the things that I heard, or not one that resonated often was like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about talking about mental health in the workplace. And HIPAA comes up. And I'm like, that's interesting for me because as a mental health professional, I'm I have a different mindset, of course, about mental health in the workplace because that's exactly what we're there to do. And so when I started thinking on my experiences in education and being and working with different principals, I started to understand better what was being said and why. So I want to take a moment to talk about HIPAA. And HIPAA was an act that was passed. Don't quote me, but I want to say 1979, 1990 something, maybe I forget the year. But it was passed to keep our information private, the information about our medical that we want to keep private, basically. It's the right to keep your health info private. That's what HIPAA is. And HIPAA can be violated if there is questions posed about one's mental health or physical health in the workplace. We are not questioning your employees or your family or any person that works in your agency. We're not asking what's your diagnosis. Are you diagnosed with anxiety? That's not what we're speaking of when we say mental health. When we're addressing mental health, we're simply engaging in a space of how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is life going for you right now? That's where we are. So when you think about addressing mental health in the workplace, please take HIPAA, ball it up, and put it to the side because we're not violating HIPAA when we talk mental health. When you personalize a question about an employee's mental health, then that's when HIPAA comes into play and there may be a violation. When it's individualized, personalized, and you're asking about a diagnosis or a particular condition. So kind of liken it to physical health. And I'll keep bringing the two up together because most of us are very well versed on physical health and what it is, how to address it, et cetera, et cetera. So if I can help get you to shift the mindset to include mental health the way you include physical health, then we right where we need to be. So just like you wouldn't ask an employee if they have, oh, you went to the doctor. What did the doctor say? Oh, do you have diabetes? We wouldn't ask those questions. So it's the same place with the mental health. But you will ask a person, oh, how are you feeling today? Did you enjoy your run this morning? You'll engage them in that space. Or, oh, I heard you ran the marathon this weekend. Wow, that's amazing. You're really really in good shape. I didn't know you were training for a marathon. We will engage in that space. We'll have that conversation and feel safe and feel okay and feel like we are connecting, which we are, with the people in our workspace. Today, I want to help you normalize conversation on mental health in the workplace because by doing so and addressing it, it will increase your bottom line. Period. It will increase your bottom line. How do I know? Because statistically, research is showing not addressing mental health is decreasing the bottom line. Not addressing mental health is creating poor concentration, poor productivity, increased physical health problems, increased mental health problems, increased absenteeism, increased in the employer's morale going down. So because I am aware of the statistics and knowing that to fail to address mental health creates problems, we can definitely know when we address mental health, it's going to create solutions. It's going to increase productivity. And speaking of productivity, let's define that one. Y'all got to hold tight because I'm so excited and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much information in a short period of time. I'm just in the definition phase. Like literally, I need to wheel it in a little bit. So, productivity means favorable results. Favorable results. Having the power to produce. How many of us have the power to produce? We can all raise our hands. We can all chime in. We all have the power to produce. What are some things that would get in the way of your power to produce? What decreases your power to produce? Anyone want to share what decreases their power to produce?
I think allowing or having things outside of that area of work to come in. Sometimes people have family problems that they will bring into their work situation. Sometimes it might be co-worker. Sometimes it's that physical health that gets in the way of actually allowing the mental health to be at the right place. There can be a number of things that affect. Just in this day and time, what you saw on the TV. I used to be concerned about the last discussion a worker might have with a family before they came to work, before they came through the fence. That a lot of times determined the first part of the day's activity for them. We had to do a little shift through a safety meeting to make sure everybody was on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. David, you just ran down like the top five. One I didn't hear is like the which is the number one, according to a study I was reading, is the relationship with the supervisor. So that's one of the number one, but yes, family, mental health, physical health. And I've heard about safety meetings with my husband being in oil and gas and seeing clients that part of that meeting is like, okay, how's it going? It to a certain extent to like check the temperature of the employees, which is amazing that that's what's done, and you're doing it in the sake of safety, knowing that if their mental health is impacted or if they're not keen, if they're not present, and there's something on their mind, that it will create a problem out in the field. One thing I'm going to talk about today is how to create program and policy to support mental health initiatives, just like many companies have physical health initiatives to create, positive physical health, to keep the health positive in a physical realm. We'll talk about that. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, David. All of those are ways that our productivity and our power to produce can be impacted. I know for me, my power to produce is impacted when I am trying to produce too many things at one time. When I have my hand in so many different places and spaces that I literally feel like I am not producing or having any forward movement. Anyone else want to share how their power to produce is impacted? So when I looked into productivity, yes, it said favorable results, having power to produce. Then I decided like, okay, let's go a little bit further and look at what does it produce mean? Because, I have a problem sometimes with definitions that use part of the word to define the word. And I'm like, how does that work? But I know that's a thing. That's what we do. But it's one of them like, now I got to go look at this word because I really, really need to know. So whenever, and I'm that why baby, I've always asked lots of questions. My mom tells a story about how I used to ask so many questions. She found this game called 20 Questions, and it had questions on there, and she gave it to me because she said, you know what, at least if you ask those 20 questions, I knew the answers to them, because it was a game and the answers were included. Because some of the questions, she said, like, I don't even know how your little bitty brain in a little bitty body could even come up with those types of questions. And so I've always been inquisitive and just want to know. I read statistical stuff kind of for fun. One of my friends called me Stat, because she literally says she often can't have a conversation with me without me citing some type of statistics. I just think it's fun. I just like to know. So when I looked at the word produce, it said to bring forth, to create by mental and physical efforts. Do you guys know how excited I got? I'm like, oh my goodness, Webster has nailed it. They have included mental and physical efforts. So if I were to take the definition of produce and productivity and put it together, it would be to create by mental or physical efforts favorable results. I just want to sit that right there. I just want you guys to take a moment to understand. To create by mental and physical efforts favorable results. We have to include both. Webster said it. I didn't say it. I'm so glad Webster said it, because if he or she didn't, I'm not going to say Webster is male or female. You know, we're going to be just gender neutral. If it hadn't been said, I was going to say it anyway. But I love to say, have a space that it's supported. We cannot create and have the power to create without encompassing the mental component, the mental efforts. And if we are choosing not to address the mental component of our employees, then we are choosing not to position them to produce, to be productive. So we have mental health defined, we have productivity defined, and then we have produce defined. Now, stress. I've defined stress in previous segments, and today and we talked about it being a physiological and mental response to external factors. So we talked about no, that's anxiety. Let's back it up. Stress is what happens in the body, how we respond to external factors. Worry is what happens in the mind when we're thinking over and over again. And you put worry and stress together and it can create anxiety. So when we talk about stress today, I want to define it and look at another definition. And it's the adverse reaction to excessive pressure. An adverse reaction to excessive pressure. Now, this is very much the same as when we talked about stress before, external factors, because excessive pressure is typically external when we're talking workplace. And it's the adverse reaction. Anyone else want to define or share what they believe that stress means to them, especially as it relates to the workplace? Okay, the reason that we are defining stress, because no matter what data I looked at about productivity and mental health, stress was there. Stress was written on almost every document in some capacity. So understanding, one, How are your employers defining stress? How do you define stress? How do you recognize your stress? What do you do about your stress? Because, like I said at the start, it has to be on an individual level that we apply the strategies, the mindset shift, the mindfulness, whatever it is, we have to be willing to do it ourselves as the business owners, as the employer, as the manager, as the supervisor, before we can even engage in that conversation with the employees. It's non-negotiable. The last word I want to look at defining is increase. And most of us know, okay, well, increase is just greater. Yeah, that's true. That's it. That's it. To become greater, to become larger, to multiply, to reproduce. So produce is to bring forward and to create by mental and physical efforts. Part of the definition of increase is to reproduce. So to do it again, to do it again. So to create by mental and physical efforts again, to create by mental and physical efforts again. We cannot escape it. So even in the definition of increase, produce shows up, reproduce. If we go back to produce talks about mental and physical efforts. Full circle, full circle. So now let's talk a little bit about how we believe that mental health, or the lack thereof, the lack of being in a calm well-being state and with mental health, how does it impact the employer? And you can share some personal experiences without sharing the personnel by name or by detail, but as a business owner or as an employee, how has not addressing your mental health created an impact for you or your organization or your business? One thing that I noticed when I was working as a school counselor, so as a school counselor, they would say, well, you're part of the administrative team, because it would be the principal, the assistant principal, and the school counselor. I often like to just feel like I was floating in the middle somewhere, because the administrative team just seemed like the bosses. And I'm like, I'm not really the boss. I'm here to help. I'm here to create the bridge. And what I would notice is the teachers who had a hard time creating life work balance and had high levels of stress would often have physical symptoms like headaches, back pain. They would have a hard time concentrating and completing one task. Sometimes they would have attendance problems. We would be halfway through the school year and 75% of their days would already be utilized, their paid sick days. So those are some things that can impact the employer. And the bottom line, when mental health is not addressed, you will have employees that in their physical and mental illness increase. Anxiety, depression, poor concentration, having a hard time making decisions, sleep. Here's the thing, when we feel that we are not able to produce or get all the things done that need to be done in a day, what's the first thing we release? Our sleep. The first thing we'll say is, oh, I'll just get up early, or I'll go to bed a little bit later. Not recognizing that keeping our sleep regulated is the number one thing that will help manage our stress, that will help manage the anxiety, that will keep our physical bodies functioning, because that's when the brain rests. And every part of our being, everything that we do, there's a rest period. Even our hearts. Some people may say, well, your heart's always pumping. You're right, it is, but it's not always contracting. So it goes in and out, in and out. And when it's in, that's a state of relaxation before it goes back out and contract. So every part of our being must rest. However, when we are faced with pressure and work stress, the first thing we release is our sleep. And understanding when the sleep is dysregulated, it just becomes a breeding ground for all of the other things. Because then I'm tired, I can't get to work, let me call in. Or, oh, I got this headache, let me drink this coffee. And then now the caffeine becomes addictive and I need coffee all the time, and I'm drinking coffee at night to try to stay up a little bit longer, and sleep is dysregulated. So that increases negative impacts on productivity and profit, just bottom line. Another thing that takes place is employee morale starts to fade. And the sad and unfortunate piece is that some companies do not take time to cultivate a culture in the workplace. So therefore, the morale of the employees differ. It's all over the place because there's not a set of boundaries or expectations, how we want to be treated. That's what a boundary is. It's not established in the workplace. And you have many different personalities coming in working together. And if there's not a corporate set of guidelines of expectations of behavior, yes, we have job descriptions. I get that. Companies do that well. They will put out the job description, but it's how do we communicate with one another in this space? How do we ask for help in this space? How do we disagree in this space? That's what I mean about creating a culture in the workplace in communicating. And we'll talk about communication on the resolution side. So when we start talking about how to implement addressing mental health, communication is definitely at the top of the list. High staff turnover is another impact on the employer. There are some professions, and you guys probably can think of some right off top, that have high turnover rate. There are some agencies that have high turnover rate. I can remember being an undergrad, working on my degree in social work. And as we were in class, the professor would share different entities and different organizations that we could go and work and utilize our degree and provide service. And in doing so, the conversation came up about working for the state of Texas under the Child Protective Services, better known as CPS. Because that's one of the go-tos. That's one of the spaces that you know automatically, like, hey, as a social worker, I can go and be of help. And she talked to us about working there and all of the great things that we could do, but also talked about the system and how it works and the high level of burnout. And that on average, and this was back, I'm about to age myself, but this was about 20 years ago when we were having this conversation. And the turnover rate at that point was about, on average, 6 months. Most would stay about 6 months before they would leave the agency due to the high demands of the job and the lack of resources to support mental health. Now, fast forward 20 years later, I'm absolutely sure that it's not 6 months. It has to be longer, simply because in 20 years, we've had so much research to know that balancing with mental health and addressing mental health helps keep the employee morale up. Work-related stress is the major cause of ill occupational health. So work-related stress is the major cause of ill occupational health. It's the major cause of poor productivity. Does anyone want to share a time that they can remember having work stress and knowing that it impacted their mental health? Having work stress and knowing, like being able to say, I know that this impacted my mental health. Okay. So so many different spaces along the way, I've recognized feeling overwhelmed. And like I said before, one of my major ways that I feel stressed is when I'm having too many projects going at one time. And so I've learned to prioritize those projects and look at timeline. So for instance, this week from Monday until Saturday, I have several different things going on, including the talk today, some recording on Saturday, some recording on Sunday. And so I told myself, and I wrote in my little planner, I keep a planner. One I use is called a productivity planner, which that's the whole idea. Let's produce. And I prioritize. And in the planner, it has you list all the things you have to do for the week. And then you take what you have to do for the week and transfer it to each day of the week. You have 3 at the top, and then you have other tasks. But the whole idea is that you have to do them in order. You can't do number 3 until you complete number 1, because whatever you put for number 1, that means that's the most important thing that needs to get done that day. You identify how much time it's going to take, and we call it it's called the Pomodoro technique. And I'll dig a little bit deeper into that here in a minute. And so that's what has helped me. I make sure that I try to stay in order. So what I have to do for Saturday, I'm not addressing it until today or tomorrow, simply because Monday, Tuesday, I'm prepping for today. There's no need for me to prep for Saturday before I prep for what I need to do for today. And so that has been very helpful for me not to feel overwhelmed, to plan and know that I have a space for everything and time for everything. Because how many of us know it's almost impossible to only have one project going at a time, especially when you run multiple businesses or just one business. If you work in the business and work on the business, that's 2 roles within itself, which means that you occupy 2 spaces, and both spaces have projects going. So while, yes, I'm the CEO of I Choose Me, I'm also the clinical director. I also see clients. So those 2 roles go together, which means that I have to prioritize so that I'm not feeling overwhelmed, and overwhelmed leads to, I got to get up early, I got to go to bed late, which not for me, because I covet my sleep. I protect it at all costs, but it means that something else has to shift or give. So when we talk about work stress, there's lots of assessments available in self-assessments. One is called the work stress scale, WSS. It is a self-assessment that you can use to measure the degree of stress that you face. It's also something that as an employer, you can give to your employees, and you can allow their answers to be anonymous. Because sometimes in the workplace, the employees do not feel safe to share what's going on with them. And part of that is the culture and the society that we live in. that says, we have to hustle, and there's pride in grinding it out. And it's like this badge of honor to stay up late and get up early and work 15 hours a day. And to not do that, one sometimes will feel that they're not being productive, that they're not producing. And then to go have a conversation or to identify stressors lead them to feel their jobs may be in jeopardy. And so it's hard to have that conversation or to communicate that, but you could absolutely make it anonymous. As an employer, as a CEO, as an owner of a company, what better way to take the temperature of your staff, of your employees, than to just have a self-assessment? We can go old school and it can be paper pencil. They don't have to put their name at the top, just drop it in the box. Or you can use SurveyMonkey. You can actually use the scale to create your own assessment. So you can look at the work stress scale and identify components that you feel are applicable to your organization, and then add others. For me, I'm also a supervisor of licensed professional counselor associates. So those licensed professional counselor associates are individuals who are pursuing their professional license as a licensed professional counselor. They have to be supervised for at least 18 months and get at least 3,000 clock hours. Part of what I do in supervision is ever so often I give them an assessment to check on their burnout. Like, where are you as it relates to burning out? Because that's something that happens also. And burnout is simply like, I'm tired of doing this job. It's so much stress in the work that I'm doing that I no longer want to do it. So, and then as mental health professionals and those who are in the service field, the other thing that we have to contend with sometimes is compassion fatigue. So I give that for them to be able to learn how to check in. I also give a self-care assessment. And so the self-care assessment goes through and divide the different components of self-care: physical self-care, emotional self-care, financial self-care, how they relate to others in their relationships, so that we can target areas that may be low, or also they can recognize the areas that they have strength in. So these are things as an employer that you can easily implement. Some of us are still kind of weary of having a verbal conversation about mental health in the workplace, but what's the reason there can't be self-assessments available? And there can be incentives for completing them. And you don't necessarily even have to get the data from it. It's just to help the employee have awareness of what's going on with them. So the self-care assessment, they can just do it and like say, hey, those who complete it and show completion, here's some herbal teas available, or here's a pass to leave work 30 minutes early, or extend your lunch and go for a walk on your lunch break. Those are all things that we can do as supervisors, as employees, that's within our wheelhouse, or as employers, that's in our wheelhouse, that takes nothing away from the organization, but it actually has the potential to add to the bottom line. So we talk about the self-assessments. There's so many different ones available. You can do surveys, SurveyMonkey, get the data. This also helps with when you're looking to bring more employees in. This is a selling point. When I used to work for Clear Creek ISD, every year they sent out a survey and to ask the employees about the quality of the job and what they enjoy, et cetera, et cetera. And they use that data to help bring others into the district to say, like, hey, we are doing a great job of taking care of our employees. And this is how we know, because they said so. And it was an anonymous submission. Another company I can think about off top, Google, has lots of great feedback, and they have so many different initiatives that they add in for the employees. Kevin, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, we and we use those same type of assessments. I'm a construction superintendent, and we have multiple, well, 3,000 plus people out there, so it's hard to touch all those employees at one time, right? So we use the suggestion boxes, right? So they're able to walk by as they're working in their area. They can walk by and put something in that box, and we gather them all up. We have a team. We have different committees that's broken up, and then we read those, and then each quarter, we come up with them. By month to month we come up, and we can't touch everyone at one time. We have open door policy, right? But we do, time to time, we read those out and go over them in a group, in small groups, where we might have our electrical people come in at one time, the pipe or the iron, you know on the construction side and new construction. So it does work. I mean, it's hard to touch everybody, and it definitely does work. And you try to be well rounded all the way around, and you try to be open, but you still have schedules to meet. You still, and those are your stressors, right? Because you still have budgets to make sure that schedule is going to be on time for that client, right? To make sure that everything's get done in a timely manner, in a safe way, without anyone getting hurt. So all of that just backs up to all the stress that comes along with that. Not just the managers having stress, but those other supervisors, the lower level supervisors, have stress. And it is a big turnover rate, like you said earlier. It's definitely a big turnover rate, because these guys are thinking about what they're going to do the next day. So they're not sleeping, they're not getting the quality of rest that they should be getting, because they're spending a lot of time thinking about how they're going to be productive the next day, when actually, without them getting that rest, they're not getting the productivity that they would be getting if they would have got that rest. With just kind of doing the brain dump, as you talks about all the time, and just being able to relax and then get to work and be able to focus that next day. So it's definitely, I agree with the suggestion box. That's one of the better ways to get it when you have multiple employees. And it's also anonymous, so they don't feel like they're singled out, or because a lot of times people are scared to talk, because they feel like, oh, they're gonna be singled out, or oh, we're gonna reprimand them, or they're scared for their job most times. So in those cases, but yeah, I do agree with the self-assessment. That's definitely a great way to go. I recommend it for all companies. Is the suggestion box, where they can kind of just walk by and just drop something in it, little mailboxes all the way around. Definitely agree with that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so very much for sharing. Suggestion boxes do go a long way if the employer is willing to make time to address the suggestions. And as Kevin mentioned, having various committees, having a physical health committee, having a mental health committee, especially if there are thousands of employees, that will help, because then on each level, the voices are being heard. Oftentimes, and I'll go back to education, because that's the place where it was as corporate for me as my experience has been. But oftentimes there are decisions made on a state level for the educators, but the people on the state level, the committees, don't consist of any educators. And so it's like, how are they making these decisions about what's happening in the classroom when none of them have been in the classroom? I see you chuckling, David, like, yeah, that's what they do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I think that's probably true across the board. Lots of businesses, particularly organizations that are distributed, that come down from the top. You sit there and shake your head. That guy's never worked a day in his life. How does he know? And but you have to take it and then mold it in and make it fit within your organization, so that you're complying with the directive and with the spirit of what they're wanting to get done. But sometimes you have to put some time and effort to make it really fit the purpose of what you're doing.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And anywhere where there's an org chart, right, for the most part, when it gets to a certain point, there feels like there's a disconnect from the other point. So if we're up here at the org chart, by the time the information flows down to here, the employee down here feels that there's a disconnect. But let's just imagine if there was a way to push in at every level. So something like a suggestion box or a check-in box where they knew that once a month, the uppers are going to sit and look at what's being said and incorporate it in our everyday motions. When I was as a school counselor, on one of the campuses, I had a Because I Care box. Because, elementary kids sometimes want to tell you every little thing that's going on. So I was very strategic about what the name of the box would be called so they would understand what information needed to go in the box. And Because I Care was about, because I care about this person, I want to let you know that this is what's going on with them. Because I care about myself, I want to let you know this is what's going on with them, with me. This is the problem. This is how I would like for the problem to be solved. So it wasn't a tattle box. It wasn't a complaint box. It was because I care, and I care enough about myself, and I care enough about others, or I care enough about the teacher that I want to bring this to your attention, but I also kind of have an idea of how we can solve it. And that created a culture on the campus where everyone knew that if there was a problem, there was a way to get help and to be heard, whether it was my problem or the student next to me or even the teacher. So imagine if you had something similar in your organization where every employee knew that there was a space where they could be heard and not judged. That within itself will create an increase in your productivity. Like, how many of us have had moments where we just want to be heard? We just want a space to be heard. That will make so much difference. And then if you decided to take the information and actually create programs from the information, imagine the bottom line. Imagine the increase in productivity. Imagine the longevity of the employee work history or work lineage with you. There are some principles that I've had that I'm like, you could not ever, not again. Not for all the money in the world. And then there are some principles that I've worked under that I'm like, I will always be willing to work under you. I would come back and work under you in a heartbeat if I chose to be back in that profession. Whatever campus you were on, wherever you were, I would be there. It wasn't the workload that made the difference. It was not the hours in the day. It was not what time my day started and what time my day ended. It was not how long my lunch break was. It was not how many days I've got sick days and paid days. That did not make the difference in never again versus always and forever. What made the difference is how that person showed up and communicated and expressed their concern for my well-being, for my individual self, for my family. That's what made the difference. And genuinely, not like, oh, let me say this because this is the right thing to say. It was ingrained in their being. That's what made the difference. Because if I think about it honestly, the one that I would say, wherever you go, I would go, some of my harder cases and difficult, complex family being with students was on that particular campus. But even to this day, well, not to this day because it's a whole pandemic, but I left the school 5 years ago, but I would still go back and visit because that was my little school, that was my campus. The environment was cultivated for protecting your mental health and elevating it. So when we talk about some of the things that this particular supervisor did differently was being able to have conversations and having an open door policy when things aren't going well. So let's just say if there was a project that needed to be done and he was like, LaShasta, I need it done in the next 2 weeks. Well, and that's great because that may fit his timeline. But since he doesn't do my job, he doesn't necessarily know all of the things that I already have planned to get done in the next 2 weeks, where this particular project may be impossible to complete in 2 weeks. And because he had cultivated an environment where we could have those type of conversations, I could go and say, Matt, that's a great idea and I'm on board. However, I'm not sure that I can complete it to my best ability in the next 2 weeks. However, I could do this component and this component of it in the next 2 weeks and it be completed by week 3. Those are the kind of conversations and communications that your employees should be able to come and have with you. Because one of the 5 things, and David mentioned a lot of them earlier, that are identified in the work stress scale that I mentioned, the number 1 work stress is the relationship with the supervisor. That's the number 1 stress. And based on my own experience, I can absolutely amen that it is. Because that was the number 1 thing that tells me I will go and work under Matt anytime that I decided to return to education, because our relationship, supervisor to employee, was a great relationship. Some of the ones that I would not ever, even if they paid me amazing money, was because the relationship with the supervisor was not conducive to my mental health. So when we think about that, being able to have that conversation, because unrealistic targets is one of the high ranking under that relationship with the supervisor. The deadlines and targets being unrealistic, but without communicating, the supervisor doesn't know that it's unrealistic. Because as Kevin mentioned, the supervisor has his or her own set of duties and responsibilities, deadlines and targets. And as David mentioned, it comes from the top down. So from the top down, everyone has their own set of duties and responsibilities. So if Candace is my supervisor, she's not checking for what's on my to-do list. She's checking for what's on her to-do list. She's not thinking about the tasks that I have. For one, it's not her job to keep up with all the tasks that I have to do. They are my tasks to do. So if I'm not able to have a conversation with her to say, hey, I'm still working on this, this, and this, or I don't know if you recall, these 3 projects are already due on this date. Can we find a different date? If I don't have that conversation, then the targets and the deadlines do become unrealistic. But part of the problem is that lack of communication. So what will be one of the solutions, you ask? Once again, we go back to some employees have a hard time talking to their employer face to face. So create a document, create a form where they can submit and share with you what targets and deadlines they already have and create a plan. One of the reasons I love Matt, and I think Matt loves me, is anytime I went to him with a problem, I went to him with 1 or 2 solutions. Now, let me tell you, it's twofold. It's really just favorable for me. Let me not even say twofold. It was favorable for me because if I took time to sit with the problem and think about solutions and come up with 2, all he had to do was pick one. And either one that he picked, guess what? I was okay with because I came up with them. So that's part of what makes the relationship work even better, is because I would go with solutions. I'm not giving him another task to put on his to-do list to solve. I'm saying, this is a problem for me. Can we solve it like this, or can we solve it like that? And very rarely was there a third option that he incorporated. Because once again, it's my problem. I'm having a problem with it. So there is the possibility of policy and program to address mental health, incorporating a few different types of forms and ways to communicate beyond direct face-to-face. Now, ideally, it's about getting to that place, but if you already know that the morale is low and at the company or not as high as you would like it to be, let's not force direct face-to-face communication on your employees. Let's gradually progress to that place, because as an employer, it's up to you to cultivate a safe place where they can share. And safe means that I can trust you. Safe means that you will be empathetic to what I have to say and not use it against me later. And most employees don't know that with certainty from direct conversation. It also means that you're not going to go talk about me to someone else, because that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day of how we communicate about what's going on with employees and to whom we communicate it. Because sometimes that's stressful within itself. If I go tell my boss this, will the whole office know? So being able to look at targets, and then I so love my time in education. Let me just tell you, I've loved every job that I've had since I was 14 years old. Yes, I started working at 14. What I do not like, and according to research, what most employees do not like and create stress for them, is that other duties as assigned. How many of us have had that in our contract? I surely had it in mine, but the task that's outside of the job description, that is a high stressor as well. Tasks that are outside of the job description, which means for us as business owners, as employers, it's important that we sit and take time to clearly develop out job descriptions. And that when there is a time that we need or want an employee to do something that's outside of their job description, that we go to them and we ask. Imagine that, yes. You ask, you respect that person because they came into your company under the premise of what's in their job description. So when you clearly know it's something outside of their job description, it's important to respect them as an adult and a whole human being and say, hey, Hannah, I know that this is not directly connected to your job description. However, there's a need for da 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 da, and I would love for you to be able to fill that need. I can understand if it's not possible because you have a full load, but let me know what your thoughts are. Understand this, you will get more yeses, more willing yeses, which means the productivity will increase because likely that employee will feel honored that you came to them to ask them to do it because you came to them and asked them to do it. You didn't tell them, you didn't send an email, you didn't act like it was part of their job description when you clearly knew that it is not. It goes a long way. So those tasks, honest communication when it comes to unrealistic targets, when it comes to tasks outside of the job description, honest communication is the resolution. Honest communication is what adds to mental health wellness. When we disregard on both sides, because as you heard me say, with the unrealistic targets, the only way the supervisor will know is if the employee communicates it. So it's not as if today I'm like, okay, bosses, boss up, here go a whole list of things that you need to do. No, because I'm a boss and I don't want anybody giving me a whole list of things to do. However, what I'm saying is that it's a collaborative approach. And as the owner, as the boss, as the CEO, it's up to us to put policies and programs in place that are conducive to our desired outcome and the mental health of the people we employ. Stress switches off our creativity. Like, it's a thing in the brain. The moment we're stressed, our creativity takes a seat. It's not possible to be our most creative selves when we are stressed. I'm currently reading this book. It's a great little book. I told you guys before, I'm different and I enjoy being different. What is relaxing and fun to me, sometimes others may not identify it as relaxing and fun. So reading is one of the things that I like to do, and I like to read lots of different things. But I'm currently reading a book called Time Off, a practical guide to building your rest ethic and finding success without stress. And a lot of us know what work ethic is, but not many of us know what rest ethic is, or even if we have one, or even what rest is. And so, one of the things that helps improve mental health is being able to rest. One of the things that allows for our creativity to flow is being able to rest. Um, in the book, it talked about Aristotle, and some of the great works that he produced was not in work time. It was in his noble leisure when he had time just to basically chill out and wonder. And unfortunately, we don't allow for space like that in the workday, where you just can just kind of chill and just rest and wonder, or having brainstorming conversations about what's on your mind, not the project that's before us, but just like, I wonder, da 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 da. If you think about some of your most innovative ideas, it did not come when you were sitting at work. It might have been when you were on a walk or listening to some music or on vacation or even reading a book. You might have read something and go like, oh, that's it. So when we talk about like having these aha moments, it's literally when we are at rest in a relaxive stage that those aha moments come. So that's the reason that stress switches off creativity. It's almost impossible to have the best ideas when we are anxious or rushed. Any questions to this point about the impacts of stress on the employer, the impacts of not addressing mental health on the bottom line, the impact of productivity and mental health? Any questions? I'm not on Facebook today to check in on the live and questions there, so I apologize. I previously I try to run two screens and I do okay, but today I'm like, it may be a little distracting. So, any questions? Do we have any questions? And I know that I've subbed in some solutions and resolutions already in the course of identifying the problem, simply because trying to keep them all on one side makes it a little less relevant. So when we can talk about a problem and I can incorporate or make a recommendation to that problem in that moment, it processes in your brain a bit different. And so that's the reason that some of them have already been addressed. But we'll spend this next period of time talking a little bit more about what we can do beyond what I've already mentioned. So when we talk about company culture, and I've mentioned like, okay, let's create policies and programs. And I know when we use the word policy, it feels very political. It feels unmental health wellness-ish. I get it, but that's just a technical term. It's really about, let's look at how we can better connect the individual to themselves and then to connect us to one another outside of the work that we're all here to do. Because let's be honest, the people that we hire, they want to be there for the most part. I'm going to say like 85% of them really want to be there. Like they applied, they interviewed, they got their resume together, they put on their best interview outfit. They made tremendous effort to be employed in your organization. So it's not a matter if they want to be there or not. It's not a matter if you want them to be there because the decision was made to hire them. The matter of the heart is how are we going to be here together so that we can journey to the same goal in similar way and not only hit the goal but exceed the goal. That's it. That's where you take the time to rest and identify what does my organization need to do to improve our being in the same place, working toward the same goal. I want everyone to take a moment and think about, if you are the employer, what area would you like to see more cohesiveness? If you are the employee, same question. What area? What area of the work environment would you like to see more cohesiveness? You can drop your answer in the chat. You can send it directly to me in the chat if you would like, or you can unmute yourself and share. What area? Is it the way that you verbally communicate in the workplace? Is it the workplace space? Is it the flexibility in time, work time, shift time? Is it the workload? What is it? And I'm asking this question because I want to be sure to address your need and your want today. I want to be able to give you, that's on the call right now, something that you can leave with and incorporate right away. Because you took the time to show up to be here, and I appreciate that. So I want to make sure that I am addressing exactly what you need. Okay, Hannah, I see you say workplace space. So is it like the physical space of how you are in the workplace? Is it like shared space? Give me a little bit more insight. Okay, shared space. So being able to like divide out the shared space, or is it like we're talking physical boundaries? Like this is my space and there may be someone coming into your space or violating your space? Okay. And so when we talk about shared space and understanding, that's when it's important to set those boundaries of, because sounds like it's employee to employee, peer to peer, and being able to like say like, hey, I recognize that you like to drink out of my coffee mug, let's just say. And look, trust me, this has been an issue. Yeah, David, like, yeah, this has been an issue. I recognize that. However, I have brought this mug from home and I prefer that only I use it. And that's the reason that I make sure that it sits in this left-hand corner of my desk. So I would appreciate if whatever is on my desk, that you recognize that it's on my desk. And if you feel compelled to need something on my desk, that you ask me first. And you have that conversation and you see what happens. And then if it continues, then you send that conversation via email. And if it continues, then you ask for the support of supervision, because you have communicated several ways peer to peer about the problem, and it seems to not have been rectified. Does that answer your question, Ms. Holmes? Absolutely welcome. Departmental communication. So we're talking within the department or from department to department? Department to department. And so when that comes up, it's about taking some time to establish some communication norms. And clearly defining, because like I said, I've worked with and live with those that are in oil and gas, and knowing that you're dealing on such a macro level with so many different individuals and different departments, that it's value in taking a moment to pause and say, this is the way we want to be communicated to. These are the things that we want communicated, and this is how. So the when, the what, the how, making sure that that's established, and when it's not there, addressing it. One thing that I've heard from that community is that violation of boundaries will take place over and over again and go unaddressed. And then there's explosiveness. And when I say explosiveness, you know, there's words exchanged and comments made that literally in any other setting wouldn't be appropriate. Does that kind of answer it for you, David?
A little bit.
Okay, give me more. What else we need?
Well, if you're in a department within a much larger organization, and one in which maybe workflow passes through a number of departments, there may be a need down to just a desire to know what's happening with that project as it moves across out of your area into another area, particularly when questions come up about what's going on with that particular project and how to get that communication established.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Yes.
when it passed through your department onto the next department, what is your level of responsibility once it leaves your department?
Probably not a lot, no direct responsibility unless requested.
Okay, and so having that mindset of I only need to know where the project is if there's a question about what my department did in the stages as it go through the workflow. And if someone comes to you, let's just say your part of the project was to take all the popsicle sticks and count them. And you counted the popsicle sticks, you communicated with the next department, there's 101 popsicle sticks. Well, if someone else comes along and say, well, David, have they taken the popsicle sticks and assembled them yet? You can say, well, George, thanks for inquiring. However, my department was in charge of counting the popsicle sticks. So what I can tell you is that there's 101, but you can reach out to Matt in the structure department, and he'll be able to fill you in on if the popsicle sticks have been assembled.
Okay. You just opened when I don't know how to get that communication. That's the issue.
When you don't know how to get the communication from
What happened to the sticks?
what happened to the sticks. Gotcha. So when you are trying to get the communication from the next department, so then it may mean that when a project is started, that there's communication of who's the key person in each stage of the project. So if the project has 10 steps and it's going to go through 10 departments, it may be of value to create a spreadsheet of the 10 people and which stage of the project it's in. So that would be like, okay, LaShasta is the purchaser of the popsicle sticks. You know, David is the counter of the popsicle sticks. John is the assembler of the popsicle sticks. So that way, if Matt comes and asks me a question about how many popsicle sticks they were, I can say, I was only ordering them, but according to the flow chart, David is the one who's counting them. Here's his email and how you can get in touch with him. So
Okay.
maybe it's a component that's added to each project, because before you start a project, you know which departments it's going to have to go through before it's completed.
Okay.
Does that answer it for
That's
you?
good. That's good.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And so it takes a little bit more legwork, but then it's going to solve so many problems. Because think about how many projects you've been on where somebody needed some information, but really no one knew who to go to for that information. And that's something that you can put in globally, because I know working in a organization where there's projects and several departments have to touch the project before it's completed, it's valuable in knowing who's doing what, because it increases the productivity. It also allows for the deadline to be met more quickly, because there's not a delay in knowing what's going on, because we can't communicate with whoever the project is. And so, and ideally, if your company is streamlined to provide particular services, then the projects are going to be duplicated. It's going to be the same 10 people. It just may be you're doing a project for Google this week and Amazon next week, but the projects are the same 10 steps. And so having that same person be point person literally would just mean creating this spreadsheet one time and making sure that it's the second page of every project presentation, every project, what do you guys call it, when all the information go together, package, that's the second page. And when you're working in oil and gas, and if you're the contractor or the subcontractor, making sure the main client has that information too. So it's not just an internal document, but it's an external document as well, so that you're not having to take calls from the client and say you don't know, and they can go and call or email directly to the person who will know, and it seems very sufficient, and they feel addressed and heard right away without having to go through 3 to 4 emails to get the problem solved.
Good thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did someone else say something?
Yeah, no, I was in agreement with David. I'm the guilty party of that, because as a superintendent, you get so busy doing other tasks. So we are resort oriented, right? So we just want the results. All I want is the results. So I am guilty of giving those supervisors those tasks, but not giving them everything that they need to carry it out. So I guess that, I can, or the company could, or we can do a better job as giving them more information from the beginning, so they don't have to. So when I come back and ask that question, is it done? Because we're in the manager's meeting and we want to know if it's done. We could use those components. I think that's a great way. But issuing it out in the beginning, and not being so busy and just say, okay, I need you to make sure this area is done. I need you to make sure this area is done. Then come back and say, is it done yet? Is it done yet? And that's how it is in my world, because I don't get down into the details, and I don't have time to go ask John or Matt if they get that done to chase down a task. So I think we could do a better job as issuing that information out from the beginning, and giving them a spreadsheet or some type of Excel form to follow up, to touch on each component of that task, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, and also thank you for being transparent to say, yes, I'm a supervisor, I'm a manager, and this is how my mind frame and how I think, and this is a place that could look differently. And most of us are result orientated. That's the reason we start a project, or we create goals, or we hire in employees to support those goals to get the results. It's just the piece here that I am wanting you all to see and take time with is how we journey to those results. What we do and how we communicate and address mental health will make all the difference in getting the very results that we want to get and then exceed. Because truth be told, if we really hone in on addressing mental health and incorporating ways to improve it, the results will supersede our expectations. Simple as that. So when we talk about, company culture, communication is one of the biggest components of cultivating a culture. How we communicate verbally and non-verbally with one another is vital to the culture. When we talk about understanding like what mental health is and is not, having some psychoeducation, it may be some lunch and learns, it may be 15-minute webinars. You guys out there in oil and gas have safety meetings. It may be taking 2 minutes to incorporate some mindfulness practices, whether it's deep breathing, whether it's expressing gratitude, whether it's, encouraging them to take lunch away from their desk on that particular day. It can literally be 2 minutes of the safety meeting. Matter of fact, I'll do one better. You could take 60 seconds because every single day you guys are having a safety meeting. And if you stay for the shift change, then you might be a part of 2 safety meetings. And you can literally buy a book. I have one book in my office. It's like 105-minute tasks to improve your mental health or something like that. And pull it out and every day give them something new. Or you can take one task, one mindfulness practice, and do it for 2 months, then do another one, or you can do it by quarter. Just repetition is great. It does not matter that you're doing the same thing every day. It matters that you are doing something every day to say, hey, we don't just care about the bottom line. We care more about the people journeying with us to the bottom line, to the deadline, to reach the project deadline. That is valuable. So expressing gratitude is great, whether it's teaching your employees to express it or you expressing it to them. Thank you for da 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 da. Not just like thanks or oh, thank you. Tell me what I did. Like, is it a genuine thank you or is it just like, oh, thank you? Because if you can tell me exactly what you are expressing gratitude to me for, then I really know that you're paying attention. So it may be something like, LaShasta, thank you for picking up Miss Johnson's class from PE when she wasn't able to get there because she was in a meeting. And I'm like, oh, no problem. You're welcome. My pleasure. That's a difference in just saying, I just want to thank the employees for, being great. No. There's a book called The 5 Love Languages. They have one for the workplace. Or you can just use the regular one and cultivate it for the workplace. Because I have to double check if they have one for the workplace. But basically, the premise is that we like to be loved, and there's 5 different ways that we like to be loved. Being able to know what the love language is of your employees will help you to personalize the approach that you take with them. Now, granted, I get it. When you working and it's 3,000, maybe not so much. But if 3,000 took the test, you could have someone assemble the information in a spreadsheet. All of these employees are like this, all of these employees are like that. And it can just be that you take note, because it may work for me, for David to verbally say, LaShasta, you did a great job in counting the popsicle sticks. But that may not work for Hannah. It may not mean anything for her that you affirmed her with your words. It may mean more for Hannah for you to say, Hannah, you know, you did a great job counting the popsicle sticks. Why don't you go ahead and, you know, take an extra 10 minutes on your lunch break? So especially for those of us who are small business owners and have under 50 employees, there's value in knowing the love language, because then it's an individualized approach. So you have 5 different languages: acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, and which one did I miss? Acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, gifts. Oh, my brain just froze, y'all. I'll come back with the 5th one. Let me Google it. I know them by heart, but for some reason, it's fading me. So with those 5 love languages, Kevin, you got me? What is it?
Did you say physical touch?
Physical touch. There we go. I probably left that one out for a reason. My brain was like, that doesn't work in the workplace. No, but thank you. Yeah. So the physical touch is one that would not work as well in the workplace unless it was like a pat on the shoulder and you ask permission before. But outside of that, the other 4 you could definitely incorporate. So expressing gratitude, encouraging lunch away from the desk. You can have like anonymous check-in. So we've talked about that already before, being able to have a system where the employees can check in and kind of have a space to share their stressors or what's going on in the workplace or not in the workplace. For those of us who are working corporately, knowing that there is an employee assistance program and understanding what that employee assistance program does and how it's available, and making sure that your employees know. I can't tell you how many clients that I've seen over the years that had no clue of what the employee assistance program was in their job. And I would ask, like, hey, do you guys have an employee assistance program? Especially when I was when the practice was mostly private pay. I'm like, if you have an employee assistance program, I'm likely a provider on the panel, and it'll give you so many sessions at no cost. It doesn't change the quality of service because it's free, because you sitting here paying me this, but if you use your employee assistant, you won't pay me anything, and I'm the same person with the same skill set. And so often I would spend time educating them on their employee assistant program. So those of you that are supervisors and managers, plugging in and knowing exactly what it is and making sure you communicate that to your employees, because it's a service that the company pays for that should be utilized. Also understanding that bringing in mental health professionals to have conversations where it is a safe place, and you're showing like, hey, we are here to help. You don't have to tell us and you don't have to talk to us, but here's someone that you can talk to. And a lot of times with the employee assistance program, you can have so many webinars or lunch and learns that's part of the package that the company is paying for. And you'll get people like me. It's not a lesser quality. It's just basically just see it as it's a prepaid service. So those are things that you can do. I've pushed into companies to do lunch and learns on increasing productivity, but at the employee level. And part of that conversation is how they spend their time and how they're communicating with other employees and their peers around gossip and rumors and things of that nature, and how it depletes our energy because we're storing this information that's not positive in our brain and processing it all day, and being able to disconnect from those who do that. So when we talk productivity on the employee level, it's somewhat a different conversation because it comes more about interpersonal and intrapersonal communication on a micro level rather than a macro level. You can another thing that you can do is encourage breaks. Talk to the employees about their breaks, helping them to understand that they are there for a reason, the value in taking a break. There's a technique called the Pomodoro technique, and like a Pomodoro tomato. And basically, it's designed to help increase your productivity by one, looking at what's the task, how long or how many Pomodoros you think it's going to take to complete the task, and then making sure you set aside that time to complete it. One thing that impacts our productivity sometimes is that we do not give ourselves enough time to complete the task that we are sitting down to complete. But if you take time with the Pomodoro technique to decide like how many Pomodoros, and typically the Pomodoros is in 25-minute segments, how many Pomodoros will it take me to complete this task? And identifying it. So let's just say if I want to read 2 chapters of the book and I think, okay, it's gonna take me an hour and I wanna read at 3 o'clock. Well, if I have an appointment at 3:45, then I can't put that there because I don't have enough time. When you decide how many Pomodoros, you literally set a timer. So if you're working in 25-minute segments, you set a timer for 25 minutes. You work for 25 minutes. When the timer goes off, you take a 5-minute brain break. Ideally, you plan what you're going to do in those 5 minutes at the start of your project. So it may be getting up, walking around the office to stretch your legs. It may be taking a restroom break. It may be grabbing a snack. It may be walking outside in the parking lot. It may be, most of us are working from home right now. It may be walking into the living room and engaging with family for a few minutes, but you set a timer for 5 minutes. When the 5 minutes is up, you go back and you start the 25 minutes again. Research says when we work for a segment of time and then take a break, it increases our productivity rather than us trying to push through and work 3 hours straight. Because once again, like I said at the start, most of our being, all of our being requires rest to really produce. Our brain requires rest. There's nothing that's part of our being that constantly runs. And so having that in mind, asking yourself, like, how can I structure that with my employees? Because sometimes it can be 25 minutes, sometimes it can be 60. If it's an hour, then you're taking like a 15-minute break. And yes, I know some people may be like, that means the 8-hour day is shorter. Believe it or not, back when Henry Ford, this was in the, y'all know when Henry Ford was doing Ford, he created the 40-hour work week, working 8 hours. They projected back then that it's in this book, by 2000, that we would have like 14-hour work weeks, based on their theory and where they were going, that if you allow individuals to rest, they produce more. So they went from 10, 12-hour days and being exhausted to let's do 8 hours. And they were like, yeah, more is getting done. So they predicted that by the time we got to year 2000, oh, we'll be working 14 hours. Anybody working 14 hours? Raise your hand. Unmute yourself and share. The reason that it did not happen is because what was discovered, oh, here it is. I wanted to find the quote. So it says, the economist John Maynard Keynes thought technological advances would lead to a 15-hour work week by the 2020s. A 1965 Senate subcommittee predicted a 14-hour work week by the year 2000. So in their minds, the more technology that we gain, David like chuckling like, oh my gosh, LaShasta, is that true? Yes, that's why I have to find the page, David, because I knew if I did not find it, y'all would have been like, no, that's not true, LaShasta. It absolutely is. The whole idea was if we create more technology, and back then they were saying, if they create more technology, that means we would work less. And that was the mindset. What has happened in our culture is that we have the technology, we have the automation, we have the machinery to produce instead of the humans having to produce, but now we've pushed the measure out farther. Instead of saying where we are is great, it's good enough, and when we put these automations in, that means we work less. It's now we just push the finish line out further. So we are actually working more than they were working when there was no machinery, no technology, no automation. And it's simply because we have created a mindset and a culture of working long hours means that we are productive. It does not. Webster did not say that. There was nothing in the definition that related to time. It related to our mental and physical efforts. So if we choose not to address mental health, we are choosing not to have our productivity be where we would desire it to be or increase from that place. It's no way possible to be productive without addressing mental health. So as you go through the next, what's today, the next 20 something days that we have left in this year of 2020, I want you to really think about the goals for your company, the goals for your organization, the goals for yourself, and how to put more emphasis on your mental health to increase your individual productivity first, and then globally your company's productivity. Is there any other questions or comments before we wrap it all up? Any questions or comments? Anything that you heard that you want more insight about or have questions about? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, like I said, there are some of the resources you can look at. I'm reading this book, Time Off. It's really great. There's another book titled Rest, R-E-S-T, to talk about more about rest ethic and improving and increasing your rest ethic, because one of the bigger components is how we rest and if we rest and having that creative space. There are planners that you can look into, the intellect change or intelligent change, the productivity planner. So that may be something that even doing that with your employees, maybe it's a gift for the holidays, and going through it and teaching them how to utilize it, putting systems and committees in place to address the concerns, practicing, incorporating ways to address your mental health in meetings that you're already having, looking at policies and programs in the workplace to address proper diet, exercise, mindfulness, to mitigate burnout. Most of us have physical health policies in place already. It's just about pushing in and adding some mental health components, and also understanding some of the physical health components. It supports mental health, but you just have to have that conversation around it. Proper diet and exercise is something that we connect to physical health, but it's just as valuable in your mental health as well. So you can have challenges of who walked the most miles in the month. and talk about how it doesn't just improve your physical health, but it also improves your mental health. If you guys need additional support in incorporating these things in your organization, in your company, with your employees, please feel free to reach out. I'm available as a consultant to help you create mental health programs and policies in the workplace. LaShastaBell.com is the best way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn as LaShasta Bell. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as LB Speaks or LB Speak. So I am here to help. Let's improve the bottom line and improve the individuals that are pushing in your company to get to the bottom line. All right. Thank you all so much for having me here with you today for our final segment of 2020. Have a happy holiday, and that's it. If there's no other questions or comments. You're absolutely welcome, Hannah. Thank you for joining us again. Thank everyone for joining. Thank you, David. I always enjoy you coming and participating and providing your insight. All right, you guys can disconnect when you are ready. I'm going to see if I thought I had co-host. There he is. I was about to say, am I a co-host today? There we go.
Not today. I gave you the day off, you know. But thank you so much. It's definitely been a joy. And so what I'm going to do is just go over a couple of upcoming events really quick. And so we just had a fantastic webinar from LaShasta. Thank you. This has been a joy. And here shortly, and about a little bit under an hour, we have our first step toward Leadership League City. So if you have any questions about the leadership program, this is the luncheon you come to learn more about our leadership program that kicks off in January. Then we have our Chamber Choice Awards. That will be tomorrow from 11:30 to 1 p.m. And it's actually my favorite event of the year because we get to thank all of our volunteers for all of their dedication to the Chamber. And then finally, that night, we will have our party on the patio. So come network, we'll practice social distancing, and we will be excited as we go into the holiday season and encourage people to stay vigilant during these unprecedented times. So this holiday season, when you shop, guess what? Shop local. Also, when you shop, guess what? Shop Chamber. Why? Because we're stronger together. Have a blessed day.